if you were to, again, lose access to that data for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, a day, 3 days, what would that mean? At what point are you screaming uncle, right? That frames cyber risk, right? Because now we're talking about it in terms that people will understand and appreciate. Because if the data that they need to run their organization is unavailable, then they're like, oh, well, we cease to exist as an organization. And again, depending on the company, some clients will say, yeah, we can live without for an hour. Some will say, a day or 2 days. Knowing that, again, helps us understand what's referred to as our risk appetite, our cyber risk appetite.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. Today we have Dominic Vogel with us. And Dominic is an expert in the cybersecurity realm, got 20 years of experience. He is also an influential leader and a trusted advisor. Dominic, so excited to have you here today to talk with us about cybersecurity.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I can't wait for all this amazingness that's going to ensue.
We always have such great conversations, so I'm really excited to see what nuggets we uncover in this today. And okay, so I have to be honest with you. Cybersecurity is not something I think about a lot. It's not something I am super excited about. I've never spoken about it on the show, so folks might be like, why is she talking about this? What is the deal here? And I'll tell you why, okay? I'll tell you why. Because I have spent so much of my career telling myself stories like, I'm not technical enough, so I can't be a part of those conversations, or I can't be on that project because they're talking about things that I just don't get. And what I've learned is this is messaging that so many people tell themselves. And the more that we educate ourselves around these topics, the more confidence we have with stepping into these roles, whether it's as a project manager, startup leader, whatever it is, to make decisions about these things. And today, we're going to learn about cybersecurity. So I'm hoping that we could talk about it in a way that is really useful to the audience, that gives them some practical takeaways and helps them understand this a little bit better and how it might impact them and their work.
And you know what? You're not alone in not being excited by it. In fact, that's why, even on LinkedIn, I rarely post about it, because I've come to realize that people aren't actively thinking about it until they need to think about it. And that, to me, is part of trying to, I'll say, normalize something like cybersecurity so people don't overthink it and don't think about it as maybe an overly technical thing, but more of a mindset, and recognizing that at the end of the day, like I said, especially in an increasingly digital world, just a teensy bit of knowledge goes a long, long way. And that's my goal, is just to make this more relatable, a tad more exciting, and a tad more energetic than some of my peers might.
That's why I love talking to you, because the first time that we met and we chatted, I was like, wait a second. Cybersecurity? Really? That's what he does? You're just you have an energy about you that I don't think you often find in this space. And so I'm really excited to get into this with you. And I didn't mean to offend anyone about cybersecurity. If there's anyone out there that's excited about it, I am grateful that you're excited about it. It's fantastic. But as project managers, we know risk management is a big part of our projects. And these are things we need to consider. As like you said, we're in an increasingly digital world. Our projects often revolve around digital products and things like that. So we need to be thinking about this stuff. So, okay, let's start with the basics. What exactly is cybersecurity for small business? Because I know that's one of your focuses. And I'm curious, when I ask that question, when we say for small businesses, what are some of the solutions it might entail, some of the issues that it solves, some of the tools that we might implement? And how would you suggest that leaders start thinking about these things? That was a handful there. Mouthful. Yeah.
And I'm going to start with the end. For me, I don't like the term cybersecurity, but it's a term that most of us now come to appreciate, or maybe appreciate is the wrong word, but understand. I like calling it cyber risk, because that's what it is, right? To really, I'll say, take away the technical sting of it, we need to stop calling it cybersecurity, because that's what makes business owners and business leaders and non-technical people thinking about it as that's the domain of the IT team, our managed service provider, right? The IT guy who no one wants to talk to. Let them deal with that. That's why, like I said, framing it from a risk perspective is when I'm having conversations with small business owners, small business leaders, it's about risk, right? And to me, it's no different than operational risk, personnel risk, financial risk. We now, like I said, live in a digital age, and it's about cyber risk as well. So just like how any business owner or executive has oversight and tries to understand those other risks in terms of how they're affecting their business, the cyber risk portfolio needs to be part of that discussion, right? And recognizing that it goes beyond technology, right? Technology is a key part of it, don't get me wrong, but making sure that you understand what that means as a material risk to your organization, and even starting with very simple questions. When I'm meeting with small business owners or leaders, I'll say, how long can you live without your key IT systems, right? The most critical IT systems, whether they be something that you own, servers that you own, whether it be third-party tools or platforms or what have you, if those were to go down, if you were to lose access to that for an hour, 2 hours, a day, 3 days, what would that materially mean to your organization? How would that affect you and your ability to fulfill your organization's mission? And I always get met with a lot of blank stares because they're like, we never thought about that before. And then I say, okay, well, think about the most critical data that fuels your organization. And I always jokingly say, in this day and age, unless you're selling tacos out of the back of a Volvo and all cash deals, you are a data company. Every company deals with data, right?
Yeah.
That's the age we live in. That's why we hear terms like business transformation, data transformation, right? That data fuels organizations today and tomorrow. And so if you were to lose access to that data, that most critical data, and I'm not talking about even like the value of it, if it's sensitive or what have you. I'm talking about what that data means to your organization in order to fulfill what you need to do. If you were to, again, lose access to that data for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, a day, 3 days, what would that mean? At what point are you screaming uncle, right? That frames cyber risk, right? Because now we're talking about it in terms that people will understand and appreciate. Because if the data that they need to run their organization is unavailable, then they're like, oh, well, we cease to exist as an organization. And again, depending on the company, some clients will say, yeah, we can live without for an hour. Some will say, a day or 2 days. Knowing that, again, helps us understand what's referred to as our risk appetite, our cyber risk appetite. Based on that, so if an organization can only survive an hour without it, our approach to security in terms of investment, people, process, technology, that's going to look very different than maybe a company that can withstand their systems being down for 3 or 4 days. This again is making it right fitted. There is no one size fits all when it comes to cyber risk management. It needs to again be fit. It's like a custom tailored suit or outfit or dress or what have you. It needs to make sense for the organization. It needs to be pragmatic, especially when we're talking about small and mid-sized organizations. It needs to be achievable. It needs to be reasonable. One of the things that I find very stressful and things that I don't like about my profession is that there's a bit of I'll call it an industrial complex. There's a lot of organizations that just do security for security's sake. That's a really bad way of doing security, right? Oh, let's buy this tool, let's buy this, let's buy that.
Right.
If you don't tie it back to risk, if you don't tie it back to what's actually materially important to our organization in terms of the key business processes, the key data we rely on, filter that up to the key systems, build your security around that. I'm a big believer in taking what I refer to as a data-centric approach to your approach to how you deal with cybersecurity. Just putting on, antivirus, whatever, on your computer and say, oh, well, we're secure. You're not, again, thinking about it in terms of business context, in terms of risk context. That's why, like I said, for me, I'm all about trying to elevate this out of the technical domain and more so into, like I said, the domain of risk, the domain of the business, because that's what business owners, business executives, leaders in small and mid-sized businesses, that's what they understand. So I'm not sure if I answered your question. I went a bit of a circular path there, but hopefully that starts us off.
It's good. Okay, so a couple insights just right off the bat. Cyber risk not cybersecurity. So just scratch everything I said about cybersecurity. Is cyber risk. And I really like that because, as I mentioned before, as project managers, we're often leading initiatives at these companies. We are focused on risk. That is a big part of what we're managing within the project. So I think that will resonate with a lot of folks here, that concept of risk. The other thing that stood out to me that you said is absolutely, we are all data companies. Like, so I was just thinking in terms of my own business, which is small, that I run, right? Lots of data. And I was thinking to myself, as you were asking that question, how long could you operate if you didn't have access to this system or this data or that data? That is a thought that a lot of people probably don't want to consider, which may be why we don't like talking about this, but but it's important. And the third point that you mentioned was I really love considering it case by case, right? Because there are different tools, there are different scenarios, different situations for each and every person, even if we're doing something similar, even if it's in a similar industry or vertical, whatever, we're all doing things a little bit differently. So how does it impact you specifically? And the fact that it's not like, I just tell everybody that they need these 5 tools and we implement them, because a lot of small to medium-sized businesses that I know, that I work with, are budget sensitive, right?
Yep.
And so it's very important that we are making decisions that are going to serve the best interest of the company and not just spend. So what are some of the different tools that you often see can help in this area? Are there certain things that you implement? Like, what does this look like in practice for you?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I'm a big believer in what's often referred to as people, process, and technology, right? So, and again, security doesn't need to cost a lot of money, especially, like I said, dealing with small, mid-sized organizations. I'm a big believer in looking at what I'll call upstream problems, right? And adding maybe just a little bit in terms of maturing people and maturing the processes, and not having to spend millions of dollars on technology. The technology only makes sense if you've mapped out, like I said, the critical business processes. Right? So my short list here in terms of for those that are listening, like, oh, I'm worried about my business. What steps should I take? First one is identify, like I said, those critical business processes and the underlying critical data and the systems that you rely on in order to deal with that data. Having that understanding, and then asking that question, how long can I go without access to this? That's going to, like I said, set your risk appetite. That's the most important thing off the bat, because then knowing that is going to help dictate what level of investment, whether that be time or financial, in terms of being able to dictate that will help you set that tone. So that's step one.
Mm-hmm.
Step two then is, I'm a big believer in making sure that there's just a basic understanding of cyber scams, phishing, all the bad stuff that we deal with, making sure that there's some level of basic understanding among yourself or your team. And that's generally referred to as a security awareness platform. I'm a big believer in what I refer to as developing a security conscious culture. Again, healthy mindset, right? And just making sure people aren't clicking on stuff that they shouldn't, or if they get an email from someone, not just blindly responding to it. Part of the problem that we've, as humans, have conditioned ourselves to is that our brainwaves, when we're dealing with stuff like email, our brain activity is actually really, really low. There have been various psychological studies that have been done that show we're, for the most part, many of us are almost brain dead when we're dealing with email, right? Almost like clinically brain dead, and we've
just
conditioned
kind of
ourselves
going through the motions situation. Yeah.
And that's what cyber attackers, scammers take advantage of, the fact that we're not really engaged when we're dealing with email. So again, introducing a healthy dose of skepticism, right? Having these conversations, maybe bringing in someone like myself to just have a quick lunch and learn with people, be able to have them a safe psychological space where they can ask questions. Yes, there are paid platforms that you can buy and do the whole the whole 9 yards. I'm not a huge believer in those starting out. but even like I said, having conversations, allowing people to ask questions, leverage free platforms. I'm a big believer of a platform called Wizer, Wizer, geared towards smaller organizations. Great starting point. So that's the people part. Next part is around process. So one of the biggest, I'll say, scams or cyber threats that affect smaller businesses is what's called wire transfer fraud. Right, that's where someone gets an email and say, "Hey, we're a vendor. You guys still owe us some money. Forget the old banking details that we say. Here's our new banking details." Right, and so money ends up being sent to someone that shouldn't get it, and we see that happen, in the order of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. In some cases, millions of dollars. I had a prospect that I was, I'll say chasing for pretty much 6 months. And I kept talking about the importance of cybersecurity. And I'll give credit to their CFO. She said, "Yeah, we know this is important, but not now. We know this is important, not now." Every time I would have a monthly check-in with her. And then one day I heard from her out of the blue when we were on vacation in Disneyland. and
That sounds
she
right.
said, yeah, it sounds about right. And she said, "I should have listened to you 6 months ago. We just got hit by a wire transfer fraud. It cost us $500,000. I was like, "Oh, that's a shame, because like my fee is not like there's barely 5% of that. You could have invested. It's too bad you didn't listen early on." And again, not to say I told you so. I try really hard not to do that. But it's what happened there is that it wasn't for a lack of certain technology. Wire transfer frauds are just hitting smaller organizations so hard because there's a lack of what I call procedural maturity. So as an example, this goes to someone maybe in accounts payable, right? And they're just going through their day, right? Oh, new banking details. Okay, we'll send it off. Here's the new money, and they don't even think about it. In larger organizations, there tends to be a level of procedural maturity. Yeah. So if money needs to go out over a certain threshold, again, what's that risk threshold? Maybe it's 5,000, 10,000, 50,000, right? Because losing 50,000 for one company may be a drop in the bucket, but losing 5,000 for a company, that could bring them to their knees, right? So having a level of procedural maturity that say, okay, anything that goes above this, you need to validate through another means. So many people, again, blindly trust email. So again, whether that means picking up the phone, calling that person, sending them a text, getting another person to reach out to them, using carrier pigeons, smoke signals, whatever you want. I don't really care, but have some other level that you are authenticating that person is, or that request is indeed legit. And like I said, that tends to that procedural maturity exists in larger organizations, doesn't exist so much in smaller organizations. So just doing that, and again, that costs nothing. You can set that procedural maturity up by doing nothing other than setting up that risk appetite and making sure everyone's aware of it. That costs nothing. And for small and mid-sized organizations, that now all of a sudden you've taken that huge risk of wire transfer fraud, you've pretty much reduced it to nothing. So before even talking about technology here, we've talked about people and process, investing nothing. And that already has a significant effect on reducing cyber risk in the organization. So I'll pause there because I threw a lot out there.
It's really good stuff. I love your approach here too, because I approach my work more holistically as well. And that is exactly what you're talking about as well, is like, hey, it's not just about implementing some tools here. There's actually a lot more to it. The wire transfer. I mean, I get emails like that in my inbox, and right now it's just me and my assistant, and I'm small enough to where that's not going to happen, right? But I could see some of the teams I work with who are more like between 10 to 50 employees, where just like you said, it is a pain point because those processes aren't in place. I could see that happening. I mean, it would be hard to believe for me, but because I'm the one signing off on everything. But for, like you're saying, those smaller organizations, that is definitely something that we should be aware of, and some simple training can help with that. I was going to ask, you mentioned having like a lunch and learn. Do you do group coaching session, group training type stuff? Okay.
Absolutely, I do. Yeah. So that's, like I said, I'm a big believer in, especially with something like cyber risk or cybersecurity, that it's, for the most part, when people hear that term, they shut off, right? And it's why traditional security training doesn't have really a material impact on creating, I'll say, more optimum security outcomes, right? I.e., people not clicking on stuff they
You
should,
just
not
tune it
downloading
out.
attachments.
Yeah,
You tune it
I know
out.
for
You
me, that's
absolutely tune it out.
exactly that.
And that's why for me, I'm a big believer in just like I said, creating these safe psychological spaces. And it's not about me just talking for an hour. I usually talk for about 15 minutes. Here's the common scams. Here's the common threats, and then just having an open space, right? Because to me, something as mundane, and like I do this for a living, I've been doing it for 20 years, and there's some days where like, wow, this is really boring, right? So me as a professional, right, if I find it boring, I can only imagine what people who aren't in the field think about it. So to me, I'm a big believer in trying to make it entertaining, engaging, energizing, right? Epic, that's one of my favorite words, in a way that people will start thinking about it and rewiring their brains in terms of being able to think about security in a different context rather than the technical team has that. Our service provider takes care of that, right? So many people don't realize that it's more of a mindset. And that's why, like I said, before even talking about technology, I spend a lot of time on the people and process, because to me, the technology piece often gives people a false sense of security, right? So they're still engaging in risky behaviors. They don't have robust and resilient processes in place. And then they wonder, why is this technology that we spent all this money on, why is it not, reducing our risk? Well, it's because the security industrial complex has gotten very good at making it sound like it's a silver bullet, but it's not, right? As with any risk management, it takes a very structured approach, and it's not just one thing, right? It's a series of things. And to me, the challenge for small organizations, it's not about what you should start doing, right? It's what should you stop doing? And I'm a big believer that any security consultant, any security person, it's very easy for them to just say, okay, here's a security framework. You're not doing this. Hey, here's our 300-page report about all the things you're not doing. That's what security looks like for a lot of organizations right now. And that's not hard. Like it's any security consultant can do that. The true value that I believe in is being able to say, hey, you know what? Knowing what I know about your business, about what you've told me about your risk appetite, in terms of what you need to be able to do in order to fulfill your mission. Here are the 3 things that I think you should focus on. That way it makes it real. That way it doesn't make it sound like a huge laundry list. That way it sounds like something that is achievable and pragmatic and practical, and they can start doing today. That ends up leading to measurable cyber risk, because what happens is with organizations, if they bring in a security consultant every year, tell us what we're not doing. Most organizations, that list stays the same, or it gets longer because it's so overwhelming, right? And I see that time and time again. Organizations saying, oh, well, we just paid, one of the big 4 consulting companies, we just paid $60K, and here's the report. I was like, okay, well, that's a lot of money. So what are you going to do with that report? We don't know. It takes us too long to read it. We don't understand what the heck it's saying, right? That is part of the problem. That to many small and mid-sized organizations, it looks like an unsolvable problem. So they're just putting it out of their mind, which is a shame, because that puts them at even greater risk than they were before.
Yeah. And your focus is really, what are the actions that we can take today to make immediate impact, to actually add value here, instead of just going through the checklist. Yeah. So you mentioned people, process. Did you say it's people, process, and technology? So those are kind of like the
people,
3.
Process. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So, and just very quickly, the technology piece, because I realize I didn't give any answers there. For a small organization, to me, the technology piece, what that looks like is a couple things. So one is leveraging multi-factor authentication, right? So for those who don't know what that means, basically it's just whatever accounts you use, especially for your for any software as a service platforms online, your social media accounts, don't just have username and password. Leverage, like I said, what's called multi-factor authentication, right? And that can take many forms, and maybe I'll do a follow-up at that some other point. But really what it means is that it adds a level of resilience to just relying on username and password. That model is broken, right? And studies have shown that if you just have username and password on, your account is pretty much good as compromised, right? So taking just a little extra step, turning on the multi-factor authentication, that again measurably if you haven't done it yet, please do it. I'm happy to help you. But it measurably reduces your risk of your account being compromised. So that's one thing. The second thing is know where your data lives. So again, whether you are leveraging Google Cloud, whether it's Amazon, whether it's you have an internal server, understand where your data lives and build additional resilience around that. So data backups, and that way, if something happens to that data, it lives somewhere else. Again, I don't want to get too much in the minutia, but that categorically is a very important spot. Make sure there's resilience around your data, because as we talked about earlier, data is the fuel that makes organizations run. So you need to have some level of redundancy and resilience there, right? And the third thing that I always suggest to focus on is making sure that whatever tools or whatever device you're using, whether it be a tablet, whether it be a laptop, make sure there's some other level of, I'll say, visibility and protection on there. So antivirus, anti-malware, endpoint protection, they have different terms. But that way, why I'm a big believer in looking at this way is that we protect at the identity level. So that's the multi-factor authentication. We protect at the data level, so data backups and data resiliency. And we also protect at the device level. That's how we engage with the data, right? Having some additional levels there. So those three things, and I'll also suggest something like password managers, but that to me is also tied to identity. Those 3/4 things, just doing that, and even with those things there, for the most part, may not cost much, if anything, depending on how you structure things. That, again, those are good technical steps to take. And here, like I said, you don't need to spend a ton of money out of the gate. That gets you a very solid foundation.
That's great. That's actually really helpful. And of course, again, I'm thinking about my own situation. I actually think I'm in a pretty good, I think I'm doing pretty good with this. Yeah. But that was helpful to kind of break it down like that. So thank you very much for that. Let's see what we have next here. You know, and I think your answer to the first question is actually going to help us with some of these follow-up topics. I wanted to talk specifically to project managers again, because we know when we're managing our projects, obviously this can look different. Projects are different size, they're different types, they're different complexity, but there's usually always some data component and technology component to it. And we know as project managers, we are really the steward of all of that. Of all the resources, we are the ones that are responsible for taking good care of it. And again, that's why the risk assessment and all of that is so important in project management. So I'm wondering if that is the case, which it is, project managers are the good stewards of their projects. How can project managers help their teams mitigate cybersecurity, cyber risk issues, or potential threats? What are some specific things they could look out for, or questions or best practices that they could put into place to really take care of those projects from the get-go?
And that's such a great question, and I think about the great project managers I worked with back in my corporate days, and that was almost 10 years ago, but they always give the opportunity for cyber risk to come to the forefront, because they would think about the project risks, or and they would think it more in terms of is there going to be a delay in coming to the service or what have you. So they would have risks, and cyber risk would just be at the bottom kind of thing. But the great project managers I always work with recognize that, hey, you know what, this is, if anything's going to derail these projects, especially after it's been implemented, it's the cyber risk. We need to give greater credence to it. So again, I try to always split it across some different planes. So the first one, like I said, is again the data that this new whatever the project is going to be relying on, wherever that data lives. What type of security controls do we have in place there? What type of processes do we have? Is this data that has only value to our organization? Or is there a level of sensitivity? So if that data was to get out, is someone going to sue us, right? Are we going to have, the privacy commissioners of, various states or what have you on our keysters? Being able to understand that, pose those questions, very important. So again, take that data plane, that data-centric view around security, step one. Another one is if you are relying on a third party, right? So if, there's a third party that's maybe creating the code to build this application, or the data is going to be living somewhere else, or you're leveraging a software as a service platform where that data is going to end up going. Asking the questions there, right? Asking them security questions. Can they provide some level of security validation, right? What type of security best practices are they doing, right? And I think being able to do that and not just saying, here's all the marketing security stuff they send us, and on their website they say that they are 100% secure or military grade encryption or whatever marketing buzz terms we hear in security.
Yeah.
Go beyond that, right? I always urge project managers to actually dig in there. If you're not sure what questions to ask, if you have a security team, leverage them. If you don't have a security team, leverage security consultants or good security consultants. I'll throw my hat in the ring there to help ask those questions for you, right? So you then have a better understanding, and you've actually performed some level of due diligence. And I love the term that you use there, stewards, right? It's a steward of the organization, right? The steward of the data that is being entrusted, right? A good steward exercises good due diligence, right? And for cyber risk, you need to go beyond the marketing fluff. If you're just taking what is on their website there, or if you're just taking, saying, hey, how do you guys handle security? And they just give you a generic answer, you're like, okay, that sounds good. That's not good stewardship, right?
Question
Ask
about
the right
that.
questions.
That's such a good point. Who do you talk to about that kind of stuff? Because so many companies, they just kind of throw back the fluff at you. So who do you talk to? Who's the person? Who's the contact that you would want to speak to get that answer?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? And I'd say there's two parts to that. So on the when you're doing, I'll say, vendor risk management or vendor risk due diligence, or supply chain risk management due diligence, making sure that you're not speaking to an account executive or a marketing rep or someone that's part of the sales process. Ask to get an answer directly from someone from their security team, their privacy team, enterprise risk management team. Again, it depends on the size and makeup of the vendor that you're dealing with. If it's a startup, right? Okay, well then can we see a recent security audit from a third party or what have you, right? We need something. Again, it comes down to what I call a burden of proof, right? And again, that burden of proof, I know I keep sounding like a broken record here, but goes back to the risk appetite, right? So if this is a system, as an example, that you're just using for like vacation planning for your team, as an example, right? If that goes down, it's not the end of the world, right? The burden of proof that you're asking for security there may be very different than compared to a system that is maybe connecting directly to your company's internal network, or you're taking your sensitive customer data, so the data that your customers have entrusted to you, and now you're saying that somewhere else. The burden of security proof there should be much, much higher, right? So again, it's case by case basis, right? How you measure the security of a vendor that doesn't really have much material impact on your day-to-day or your data. First one that, if something was to happen to that data, right, would make your customers lose faith in you or lose trust in you. You should have a higher burden of proof there, right? So don't always take, like I said, a cookie cutter approach. But like I said, when you can get the answer directly from someone on their security team, their privacy team, their legal team, right? Then those are answers then that it gives you a higher level of accountability. Should something happen, you're able to say, well, on this date, we got this answer from your security officer or from your chief legal officer. Again, when you're asking for answers, ask for proof as well. So that could be security certifications, security audits from third companies. Again, there's a long laundry list there. The second part to that is if you don't know what questions to ask, like I said, that's why it's important to have a trusted security partner or advisor that can help guide that process for you.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. That's really great advice, I think, especially for project managers. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this session, I speak to project managers all the time who are in that scenario where they're kind of like, oh, I just push that stuff to the side because I don't feel comfortable with it. I don't know who to ask or how to talk about this. We often, for many of us, make it a lot more complicated than it really needs to be. And in many cases, it's really just about knowing what question to ask and the person to go to. We don't have to be the experts here in all of this. We don't. We just have to know where to go to find the right answers. And what you just gave to us there is gold. Thank you so much. It's going to be really helpful, I know. It's helpful. It's helpful to me already. So thank you. Okay, cool. Let's move on to another question here. Okay, this is an interesting one. This is a good one. So many folks I talk to and who are in the audience here, they are part of project initiatives that maybe involve technology or have that oversight. And I would love to give them some insight into how they could advocate for incorporating budget-friendly and easily managed cybersecurity options, specifically when they're talking to like an executive or a leadership team. Like if they know these things need to happen and they've received pushback in the past, how do you kind of sell it to the people that you need to sell it to show the value of these solutions?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And it's part of the problem with security is that trying to quantify its value is very hard, right? That's been a a battle that's been going on for many, many years, trying to quantify. Well, if we're spending X on security, what level of risk reduction would we see? And compared to other levels of, I'll say, investment, where being able to say, well, if I purchase this for fire insurance, right? We know statistically what the likelihood of a fire breaking out in a commercial building or what have you, or with earthquakes or what have you. That level of statistical data goes back hundreds of years, especially with insurance companies, and we're able to fairly predict that because for the most part, it's fairly static, right? There's a level of predictability there. Cyber risk is far more, I'll say, fluid and far more dynamic compared to traditional risks that face organizations where they can have a level of, if I invest this, yeah, we know we're going to be able to reduce that to a level that we're happy with. Cyber isn't quite like that. There's a lot of, I'll say, quasi-quantification, which is better than non-quantification, right? And again, depending on your executives, some may resonate more so with metrics, some may resonate more so with narratives, right? So I try to identify, early on when I'm dealing with an organization, are they more narrative driven or are they more, metrics driven? So for those that are narrative driven, right, being able to also just weave a narrative and not coming across from a place of fear mongering, but more, I'll say, painting a path of potential outcomes, right? So if I have a client that's not, going forward with some investments, I'll say, okay, well, if you're not going to be doing, multi-factor authentication as an example, here's a range of outcomes that could happen, right? And I'll paint a picture. CEO account gets compromised, right? CEO does not have any, data protection right now. His email has all this juicy, sensitive data from clients and customers. This is what happens. Hard costs for when you get sued are going to be this. I'm just picking a number here, but here's what I think in terms of customer churn, right? So it's weaving a narrative with some, like I said, quasi-quantification, and they're like, oh, didn't think about that, right? So again, it's part of trying to paint a narrative and understanding in this day and age, if something happens, in the event of a data breach or what have you, thinking about things such as brand, reputation, again, depending on what field you're in, sometimes that is important or it's less important. If you're in more regulatory driven spaces, right? Getting the regulators after you, that's not good. The specter of lawsuits, right? Especially in a country like the U.S., which is a fairly litigious environment compared to I live in Canada as an example. Yeah, there are lawsuits after data breaches, but it's not to the same extent that it is in the U.S., right? Do you really want to risk having a lawsuit thrown at you by not making a $10,000 investment? Right? Stuff like that helps weave a narrative. And ultimately, it's about, I'll say, accountability as well, and recognizing that, especially if there's a board of directors involved. So if for example, if a CEO or the executive suite says, now, we're not going to be worried about this, as a project manager, I'd say, well, what, can we at least make sure this is communicated to the board, right? Board of directors can be held directly liable for any or lack of oversight or lack of guidance when it comes to cyber risk management. And really what that means at the board level is that, right, they can be personally sued, which is not a good thing. Right? And if they're now personally at risk, a lot of board members tend to be more incentivized. So it's a bit of an extreme example, but it worked for me. I was not getting anywhere with a executive team, and I asked to speak to the board of directors. And I said to the board of directors, I said, well, you know what? Your cyber risk is very poor at this organization, right? And right now, you could each be personally liable should something happen. And I said, you know what? Do any of you really want to lose your yacht? And this was a company that I knew had a lot of money, and the board of directors were, they were an affluent bunch. And I remember seeing in the eyes of several of them, and I made it real for them. I made it personal. It wasn't about brand or reputation. Again, you need to understand ultimately what is it that incentivizes people. right? And for this particular company, which was, like I said, had a lot of money, but was very poor in terms of understanding risk, I had to make it very real to them, right? And I remember after making that call and speaking to the board, day after, security budget was approved, things were moving forward, right? The board stepped in, right? So again, extreme example, but understand where are decisions made in the organization, who is it that you need to inform, and to what level do you need to motivate or inform them? Because like I said, just saying, we need to do it for security's sake, people don't care about that. It's take me 20 years to understand that, but they don't. So make it real. What is it that truly matters?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Such good insight there, not only for this topic, but for so many. I mean, I know we speak a lot about how to speak to executive leaders, senior leadership team, and it really is just what you said, figure out what's going to resonate, what's going to make the biggest impact, and then go from there. So great tip there. And I would love to kind of like shift our focus now as we are, we're getting close on time. Oh my gosh, I knew this would happen. I
It's
knew
just
it
flying
would.
by.
Yeah, it does. So I want to shift focus because you are a cyber risk expert. Like this is what you've been doing for 20 years, but there's another side to Dominic Vogel, not another side, but there's something else you do that is really exciting. And it's kind of like what I think probably drew me to you in the beginning. We met on LinkedIn, and we both have a big commitment to giving back, to kind of paying it forward, to mentoring. And you do technology leadership, mentoring and coaching, which in my experience, I could personally say how valuable I think that is. I have spent time working in tech startups. I've been the project manager on many projects where I had developers actually crying with me in the room or on a call because they felt so unsupported, so unheard by technology leadership, who was very good at what they did from a technical aspect. But there was this people leadership element that was kind of missing. And so I got really excited when you told me that that's one of your passions and something that you do. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about that, about how you support technology leaders, specific resources that you use maybe, or that you're interested in sharing.
Thank you. It is my passion. That it's fine. Like cyber risk management is what I do, but I absolutely love the people part. And for me, I hear a lot, especially in cybersecurity fields, right, that people are always saying, "Oh, there's a talent gap, right? There's not enough people, to fill the positions." And I think that's the biggest load of bull ever. There isn't a talent gap. There's not. There's so many people who are trying to break into a field like cybersecurity or IT. Where the gap is that leadership, right? There's a massive leadership gap, and there's a massive, what I refer to as a human-centric leadership, right? There's no people especially cybersecurity circles and tech circles, the people who are in leadership positions are rarely there because they're the best leader, or that the people who best inspire their team, or the people who can help, lead the team forward. They're generally there because either they're the most technical savvy, they know the most about security, or they've just been there the longest, and they've outlived and outlasted everyone else. Not really great traits for a leader. And why there's so much burnout in our field, again, because leaders are ill-equipped in terms of, like I said, keeping their team just not necessarily happy, but in a state of motivation, right? A sense of purpose. And one of the things which in tech circles and cybersecurity circles is that the whole, I'll say, people call them soft skills. I call them just people skills or human skills. They've never been prioritized, right? So when I talk to an organization, I say, can I look at your training plan for your tech team or your security team? They've all and a lot of them will invest in their security certifications, tech certifications, but you never see anything around, well, how are you going to make your technical team more, more empathetic?
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to help them communicate more effectively? How are you going to be able to help them get, a level of mental resilience? Oh no, why would we do that? They're the tech team, right? We want them to just do tech things. So you dehumanize them that way, right? You're not treating them as people, right? You're not treating them as humans. So like I said, for me, when I rebrand over the past year. My company name doesn't actually have the word cyber in it. It's Vogel Leadership and Coaching, right? Yes, there's the cyber leadership piece, but more so I focus on really equipping IT leaders, security leaders for themselves to lead their teams as leaders. And I jokingly say, I take away the tech from tech leaders and put more humanity in them, right? And then that way you see higher performing teams, right? You see them, like I said, there's less burnout. They're more effective. They feel more connected, more purposeful what around they're doing. Why? Because we've now made it human centric, and we've taken, like I said, that tech shield away. Like I said, for anyone listening, especially like I said, if they're earlier on in their career or if they're struggling with a leader that doesn't get them, reach out to me anytime. I do mentoring for anyone that reaches out. One of the things that I believe in giving back in is just helping people who are struggling in their security career or their tech career. It's something that I was very fortunate that during some of my dark corporate days, someone helped me. And I was very fortunate because I could easily have just left the field and gone somewhere else. So for anyone listening, they can reach out anytime. However I can help as a friend, I'm very humbled to do so.
I love it. Yeah. What's interesting is you mentioned kind of bringing that human element back to the tech side, just as I mentioned with project managers who are often more people oriented, right? We need a little bit of help with that tech stuff. We're so people oriented. We need a little bit of help with the tech, but the tech needs a little bit of help with people. And when you think about it like that, it makes sense. I mean, we all need to be well-rounded, and there are all areas that we can use help in, honestly. And one of the things I love about you, because we've had several conversations now, in addition to chatting on LinkedIn and hanging out on LinkedIn, we've had several conversations like this, and you are a person who I just instantly was like, this is a psychologically safe person. This is someone who is really offering good things into the world. And just that trust is there with you. So I wanted to throw that out there as just an endorsement for you as a human being and appreciation for what you do, which leads me to my last question. Okay, my last question is a bonus question. And I don't know what a bonus question is, but I'm calling it a bonus question.
I like the sound of it.
Yeah, right? It sounds like you're going to win something if you answer it right. So, but you're not going to. So my last question is, I see you on LinkedIn. You're on LinkedIn every day. You write these comments that every time I see your name at this point, I just smile. Like I instantly smile and I feel really good. And I could tell that you are putting good things out into the world because you want to, because you believe in that. And it's part of your purpose. It's part of what drives you. So I'm curious, because I get this question a lot. I feel the same way. Like I have a lot of, I have this purpose and I need to do it. How do you stay motivated to offer that to the world? Because we all have ups and downs. So on your days when you don't feel like doing that, first of all, do you ever have days when you don't feel like being a positive, upbeat person? And what do you do with that? How do you stay motivated?
First of all, I've already won because I get to be your friend. So to me, I already won. So, but it's funny, when I started on LinkedIn, or started being more active on LinkedIn, is when I started, when I left corporate and started becoming an entrepreneur. And I was just posting about security. I was DMing people trying to, sell my, security services, and it got me nowhere. And I had this level of epiphany. I was thinking, A, people really don't care about this, but more importantly, B, I thought, there's a lot of negativity here. And what if I just try to be friends with people? What if I just try to, if I can be a random smile on someone's day, why don't I just do that? That seems more purposeful, And so I started doing that. So this is I'm entering year 7 of me consistently doing this, and it's been the most life enriching decision I ever made, apart from being a dad. In terms of being able to just share random silliness online, just to, like I said, make someone's day. The reason I do it is that it goes back to recognizing who I am. Yeah, what I do is cyber risk management and coaching, but that's not who I am. Since I can remember, I've always tried to be that person who just tries to be there, right? Be that psychologically safe person for people to smile, to have, to turn that frown upside down kind of thing. And in the early days when I started posting, I would get people saying, hey, you know what? Because of you, I only get one comment on my post, but it's always you, and you keep me motivated to keep posting. And a lot of those people end up becoming massive people online who had huge followings. And when they say, hey, it's because of you that I kept going, it's because of you that I now have this massive following, it just feels amazing, And do I have days? Yeah, there's days where I don't feel great, but by sharing that positivity online, even on days when I'm not feeling great, I feel better. So it's been one of the greatest gifts in that, knowing that I can make people's days with just some random words. And I love alliteration. I love random wordplay. That feels great. And knowing, like I said, on days when I need to lift my own spirits up, making someone else's day brighter makes my day brighter. So that's why I post those things. That's why my posts have nothing to do with security. That's why my comments have nothing to do with security. That's why, like I said, at the end of the day, I'm just trying to spread some kindness, spread some laughs, because there's not enough of that. And I generally focus on celebrating and supporting women, because at the time I recognized, I thought there's so much of the vitriol and negativity was aimed at women. And at the time, I didn't have my son, but I still have obviously my daughter, but I thought, I don't want her to grow up in a world where men are tearing her down. It's bad enough. It's hard enough to grow up in this world. So if I can just be and act like the man that I hope she sees men should be and are capable of being, then I'm going to keep doing that. So that's why I've, like I said, chosen to focus mainly on supporting amazing women like you. And like I said, it's been a very blessed journey, because I think of all the amazing lifelong friendships, this one included, it's been more of a gift to me than anything else.
Oh my gosh, I'm getting chills. I have so much gratitude for everything that you do, because it's true. It's rough out there on the streets of LinkedIn or any social media. Although I'm just on LinkedIn, but it is rough out there, and it helps to have a supporter. And I know for me, I found a lot of inspiration when I first started getting on LinkedIn from the posts of other people who shared about their journeys and things like that. I found a lot of inspiration that helped me keep going, like beyond what I could verbalize here or anywhere else. It was very powerful. And so that's why I have my focus as well, as sharing part of my journey, and because you never know who you're going to touch, and it all matters. So thank you so much for that. That is good work that you are putting out into the world. And I appreciate you, my friend. And I appreciate you sharing with us on the show today, all of this information. I would love it if you could offer to the audience where they could find out more about you, and where to find you.
Yeah, absolutely. And likewise, I appreciate the heck out of you, my friend. This hour just flown right by. So LinkedIn, Dominic Vogel. Just if you're not sure, it's me. Just this. I mean, it says Vancouver, Canada, but I'm pretty sure I'm the only English-speaking Dominic Vogel on LinkedIn. And it's Dominic, and then Vogel. So that's where I swim and play. So please find me there. I'm looking forward to building an awesome friendship there. Or you could check out my website. It's vogelleadershipcoaching.com. And it's all written in a very human-centric way. And I try to write the complete opposite of any other sort of consulting website I've ever read. So it's written in a way that my comments and my content in LinkedIn is written. Like I said, very, very human-centric and kindness-centric, but that's where to find me. So please reach out.
Awesome. I'm going to link it all up in the video description box here on YouTube and wherever else this gets posted. Thank you so much, Dominic. It was great chatting with you, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.